Welcome to Speaking Cinema, serious movie jibber jabber, a movie podcast coming to you live from Hollywood, California. But don't tell anyone, it's secret espionage. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. Listen to us jibber jabber every single Monday, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes. I am your host, Special Operative Mr. Jibber Jabber. With me today, as always, my underground liaison in a trench coat, codenamed Kevin.
That's me. I mean, no, it's not. You know too much.
Time to go. This week on the Jibber Jabber, we continue this month's director buffet, looking at the films of Steven Spielberg with his most controversial film, question mark?
I think so.
2005's Munich. You think so?
I think it is his most controversial. We'll get into why.
Starring, also not a good, no good tagline for Munich apparently.
This movie kind of didn't get
that.
It had a very somber marketing campaign to match its very somber tone. So.
Starring Eric Bana, Daniel Craig,
A pre-James Bond Daniel Craig,
but still with those blue eyes.
those pretty blue eyes.
Ciarán Hinds, Matthew Kassovitz,
Not you.
Michael Lonsdale, Matthew Ulmerich, and Jeffrey Rush.
And Jeffrey Rush.
What? As a pirate? Written by Tony Kushner and Eric Roth, based on the historical book Vengeance by George Jonas. Produced DreamWorks, Amblin, Candy Marshall Company.
The usual suspect.
The usual suspect.
Modern day Spielberg.
Distribution, Universal Pictures. If you're not familiar, after the 1972 Munich massacre, where 11 Israeli athletes and coaches were killed, the Israeli government forms a secret team of Mossad agents to kill the terrorist leaders who were responsible for planning the attack.
Mossad is like Israeli CIA, basically,
Yes.
for those of you who do not know.
For those of us who didn't watch Covert Affairs.
Oh, no.
I watched that show, Kev. It's a fun show. Piper Perabo, dude. She's great.
I like Piper Perabo.
Shot over 6 months across the globe, the shoot was a race against the clock to get the film completed for a 2005 December release. Scenes were edited on the day, sent directly to John Williams to score and Ben Burett to sound design. The final cut of the movie was in the can just 4 weeks after the final day of production. Score 1 for efficiency.
That is just, they churned this thing out. And this is not a simple movie, you know, it's lots of characters, lots of locations. It's to get it done with that level of just complete precision is that the work only a professional could pull off.
Film was well received and nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. The Oscars are an award show that one would say is the biggest movie award show for people who haven't heard of this.
Yeah.
However, controversy not far behind. The movie was based off a book by George Jonas. The accounts in that book are contested by the Israeli government, calling the main source for the account, quote unquote, a fraud. The Israeli government has said the film is unfairly sympathetic to Palestinians, while the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, says the film was unfairly sympathetic to Israel.
Which means it's probably pretty even-handed.
So, 2,000 years, do we think that they're going to fucking agree on this? Of course not. As of this recording, Munich is available on iTunes for digital HD download, and other platforms such as Vudu and Xbox Store and the Sony PlayStation Market. DVD, Blu-ray.
Blu-ray just recently came out, actually.
Really?
Not too long. It was on DVD for a very long time, but only within the last year got a Blu-ray release.
It has streamed in the past, so they're not against that concept. It used to be on Netflix, not on Netflix, but check your local listings.
I bet there's some DreamWorks contract that was upped at one point and is kind of in renegotiation.
As of this recording, DreamWorks recently sold to Universal.
Yes, it's true.
But DreamWorks Animation, which is a different company than DreamWorks Live Action.
Yep.
Welcome back to Talking DreamWorks. Kev, you watch this movie? You own this movie?
Saw it in the theaters.
Interesting.
In 2005. Yep. I like a good espionage story, especially one based on real life. And obviously I was a big Spielberg fan at the time. Still am, but really getting into his more adult material. And just when I read the story about it, just thought it was very fascinating, very interesting. And so saw it in theaters, bought it on DVD, owned the DVD for a long time, finally re-upped to Blu-ray.
I remember this movie coming out. I remember not seeing it. I was waiting for, a movie with some sort of, vampires in it, or perhaps a robot.
Yep.
So I was not interested in this. I was not really interested in Academy Award style movies at the time. This is the time where I'm trying to watch like the worm in the white worm in the lair. What's that movie? You know what I'm talking
about? What? The white worm in the lair.
Pause.
I think that's a maggot.
The Lair of the White Worm.
What is that?
It's an English 1988 English horror movie directed by Ken Russell, starring
someone very memorable.
Hugh Grant.
Oh, Hugh Grant, huh?
Yeah.
Was this
memorable?
Bumbling charmer Hugh Grant?
I think it's 1988, so if it hasn't
before,
started, it's about to go.
Yeah, it's before Four Wings.
Yeah. I'm trying to watch Lady Snowblood at the time, Kevin. Okay. I'm not really interested in what Hollywood has to offer.
Gotcha. And this movie came out, the Best Picture nominees that year were Munich, Good Night and Good Luck, Brokeback Mountain, and Capote. I think it was Capote. And they all lost to fucking Crash. That was that year.
Which one was Crash? That's the racist, the race one, right?
Not the one where James Spader fucks a leg. Yeah, the one where everybody's racist.
Also, we have to watch James Spader fucks a leg for this podcast. We have to, right?
We should. Why not? But yeah, it's that was a stacked year for the Best Picture nominees, and fucking Crash walked away with it. So.
It could have been worse. It could have been Babylon or whatever that movie was.
Oh, Babel. Actually, yeah, that was the next year, I think. So
yeah, that movie, Jesus Christ.
I agree with you.
So I never watched it. I had a friend who watched it. She said it wasn't very good, but she had bad taste in movies, so I was never really fully convinced of that.
You do have to gauge your friend's taste when they offer you things like that. There's someone in my film school who, like, if they gave somebody a bad note, I was like, that's probably the best way to do it then, because they had terrible taste. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough. We love our friends, but sometimes you got to gauge them that way.
Well, but it's anyone with any art form, right? It's like, what do you like? And you have to contextualize. Speaking of contextualization, in our last episode, or a few episodes ago, we talked about the most Spielbergian of all Spielbergian movies, E.T., which, if you remember, I did not like.
Viciously hated. Viciously.
Accurate. This movie is arguably the least Spielbergian. Usually, hopeful tone, nostalgia, magic. This one replaced with gritty real-world story of issues we still face today. Hardcore violence, terrorism. I would argue
filmed in a very different way, too. Not his usual, lot of sweeping camera, lots of different things. He used a lot of the 70s techniques, and he's just really changes up his style to tell his story.
I would say there's two Spielbergs. There's Kid Spielberg and there's Gritty Spielberg. Okay. Gritty Spielberg, Saving Private Ryan, Jaws, right? Where he's not afraid to fucking, take someone's head off. Yep. And then there's like the upcoming BFG and
E.T.,
which is like Kids Spielberg. Yeah. Also,
Jurassic Park, a little bit of both.
Can we get a campaign going? Can we get fucking Spielberg to make a horror movie? He's 70 years old. All I want is one last go around. Let's fucking. I want a Spielberg slasher movie. Can we do that?
He arguably made Poltergeist, but
No. But that's like a. I'm talking about like
a kids horror movie.
I'm talking about like I want like high tension from Steven Spielberg.
Ooh, all right.
I want people to be like I want think pieces to be running in circles around themselves, not trying to figure out what to say. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I didn't see this movie, and. What do you think about the gritty Spielberg movies as opposed to the whimsical ones?
He effortlessly moves between the two, I think.
But as we're learning, I don't like these whimsical ones at all.
As we're discovering, that's for sure. I think he knows he's such a student of film and different techniques and how to use them and what technique is effective doing certain things. And he knows when to turn some things on, turn some things off, do things a little differently. He just always has kind of the right shot in his pocket, to do, like when Vin Diesel dies in Saving Private Ryan. It's like that whole sequence. You've never seen him really tackle anything like that before. It's the sniper. They're like having the cat and mouse game with the sniper. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's sequences in this that we're going to talk about that are very just done it. He can just do so many different things, and so I think it's tough for a lot of filmmakers to do that. David Fincher could never make E.T. If David Fincher made E.T., everybody would die. So, but it's David Fincher, another great filmmaker, but he definitely has a certain style and mold that he fits into. So,
I remember the marketing of this movie making it seem like it was edgy, and I just did not buy that at all.
how so?
I just don't think. I
just remember it being very somber.
I remember the marketing implying that they were gonna blow up the little girl. That was like that scene where.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so they were. That was like, and I'm like, there's no fucking way he's blowing up this chick. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way he's not gonna do that. That being said, recently we watched Jaws. Spoilers for Jaws. Kid gets eaten in that movie. They show the whole thing. So maybe I was wrong, but I just think that Spielberg post kids. I just don't think that he has any balls like that.
All right.
Which is why I want that horror movie, Spielberg. I want you to skin a cat.
And then eat it, too.
Kev, what's your plan for world peace?
Can we just, realize we all suck and that nobody's better than anybody else, and then we can just all go get a beer together? I think that's where it is. It's just you should aspire to be this person. It's but that person sucks, too. We just be guess what? We all suck in all exciting different ways. Nobody's perfect. It's just, what are we fighting about? That's my very simplistic, very streamlined view of why we don't get along.
But he did it. I guess, yeah, I mean, it's weird. You look at America, and it's we're living in post-apocalyptic America, right? The Civil War is basically, for the South, was the apocalypse, right? Our way of life is going to be taken away from us if we lose this war, and lo and behold, they did. And then we pushed out in making them, there was a time where, there was the National Guard or whatever, the army was there to police the South a little bit, took them all out, Jim Crow, it all gets fucked up again. And now we're finally getting to a point of starting to really, move past it, 100 years later.
Yeah.
So it's I guess the solution is that everyone has to just be forced to live with each other, and then we'll police them into getting along.
Or it's attitudes of a certain generation not being passed down to the next generation, Not to give us props in our generation, but there's a lot of baby boomer things that we're just not jiving with anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Also,
again, we have all of our faults too, and we'll get over that. Yeah. But
And I will say, I'm not saying that the generation under us is perfect either. The whatever millennial plus is what they're going to call them, but they are cooler than we were when we were their age. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
They got shitty. They got shitty love for the DJ, which I don't appreciate. The DJ's the party. It's go fuck yourself.
Get out of here.
But it's you look at the music festivals the kids go to, and it's the Misfits are playing with Rob Zombie and Morrissey.
Yep.
What? Who's the audience for this? But they'll go.
I'd go to that one.
It's Riot Fest, dude. Riot Fest.
Let's go to Chicago. Go Riot Fest.
There's a closer one in Denver.
Okay. We're off to Denver. Go see Morrissey.
And the original Misfits play.
The original Misfits. Mozzie. They should do the Mozzie Fits. The Mozzie Fits. Morrissey fronting the Misfits.
Oh, that's the Smith Fits.
So
that's the actual.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Smith Fits.
Come sweet death, my love. Oh, spare you all my Morrissey impression.
Right. Let's get this going, because this movie is 2 hours and 44 fucking minutes.
Yep.
Another long one from Spielberg.
He can pack them in. That's for sure.
All right. So anything else?
Nope. Let's do it.
Let's get it. Here we go. And we're back. Kev, when and how and where did you watch this movie? I watched it. Let me cut you off. Last night, DVD from the library. There you go.
I had my Blu-ray copy off the shelf. Watched it. Watched it a couple weeks ago. And I have seen it. I saw it twice in theaters and several times when I owned it. So it's a pretty ingrained movie in my psyche. So yeah. But yeah, I watched it again.
So, I told you I didn't like whimsical movies.
Yep.
So this is more in the gritty vein.
This is absolutely in the gritty vein.
And I will say that I think there's a good movie here, but...
God, you're hard to please.
But this movie is way too long. Way too long. This movie is probably an hour too long.
No.
This is an incredibly long movie.
No.
It kept going and going and going.
Just this conflict, and it's long.
Hold your horses.
There is no simple solution.
I will say, I think the simple solution for this movie would be making a miniseries, which I think would have been really good because every episode would be about a different kill. And I think that would be really interesting.
That could be interesting.
I think, come on, that would be better than what we got here.
No,
right?
I don't think it'd be better. I think that's an interesting idea.
You don't think that would be better?
Conceived that way.
So one episode's in like Rome, one episode's in this, one episode's in that. You know, and like one episode they kill the Swedish girl or whatever she was.
Yeah, Dutch. Yeah.
Yes, she was Dutch. But let's start from the beginning. Or do you want to give your overall thoughts?
No, I think this is one of Spielberg's best films, top to bottom.
Top to bottom.
Yes.
One of his best.
That bottom end gets a little fat, and we'll talk about that. Again, he doesn't quite stick the ending on this thing, or at least gets a little too long to get to sticking to the ending. But I think this is another... Again, he can go to this really gritty style, this really different style than what he's used to doing, and he can absolutely nail it. And I think this movie is great.
I'm saying this movie is a cat with its belly dragging on the ground. Is what I'm saying. Let's talk about the opening. The opening is fantastic.
Yes.
The opening, to anyone who forgot, is the initial attack that happens from the on the Munich Olympic Village.
Yep.
They're Palestinian. Who are the bad guys?
They're Palestinian.
Palestinian gunmen, terrorists, freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. Murder and capture a bunch of people, and the way it's shown,
specifically Jewish athletes and their coaches,
right,
who are staying in Munich for the 72.
Right, the Israeli team.
Yeah.
The use of, in direct contrast to Warhorse, the use of silence and music in this is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're showing you very disturbing, graphically violent images, but they turn down the gunshots, and so the visuals are very upsetting, but the music is kind of even keeled, so you never look away. It's not encouraging you to look away, it's encouraging you to look at this terrible stuff, and the storytelling in it of the desperation on both sides, the gunmen being nervous and in over their heads, the other people being afraid for their lives, perfectly done.
And the way the news media is just trying to even make sense of it.
Right.
Just absolutely limited information.
Right. Totally.
You know, there's that, and they use like actual news footage, and there's that one shot where there's a gunman walks out and he's got a stocking on his head, and the news guy's like, there's a person with a ski mask on. Weird. You know, it's like that actually happened. It's like, how do you make sense of this in like that world?
And Kev, you'll remember from our Batman vs Superman episode and many other episodes where I say, as a general rule, I hate news footage in movies.
I agree. It's a crutch. It's a crutch 99% of the time.
Except for here.
1% is Munich.
Where, exactly right. Because, and also, they're not afraid, because I realized from this movie is that a lot of movies stop. I'm Connie Chung from fucking Channel 6 News. That's from Family Guy. But whatever. Yeah. Here's our top story. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then, what do you think, Kevin, our analyst? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This is just, I don't know who's talking. I don't know. It's just information that we need. And you're seeing various groups around the world, the hostages' families, people who are implied to be the gunmen's families, general people all watching the news.
And there's a great shot too when they're transporting them to the airport. He just sweeps over a bunch of different cameramen, and it's in German, it's in French, it's in, he gets all these different reporters. It's like the world is watching this thing. Mm-hmm. And he captures it so effortlessly.
And then an explosion happens, and it's like, ooh.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, I want to say just up front, there's a lot of political stuff in here that I'm just not well versed enough to really understand.
Maybe I can help you out, because I did a lot of research. After I saw this movie the first time, I really dug into a lot of the different organizations, what they stand for, and just really wanted to get a bigger sense of the conflict, like how it affects the real world.
Okay, so let's talk about these real quick. There's two things that I was like, one, I didn't know who the PLO were, and they bring that up a bunch of times. I think the French family thinks that the Israeli Mossad agents are PLO at one point, right?
Yeah.
Are they being sarcastic because they know that they're Jewish, or they really just don't know?
I think they're playing that cat and mouse game of like, oh, we're gonna see if you break. You know, it's like if I mention that, do you flinch? Like, and are you actually doing that? Because there's again the French family, Matthew Almeric and Michael Lonsdale's family is. You know, like
I thought that was Dumbledore for a minute, but it's not.
He was a Bond villain, actually, Michael Lonsdale. So, Moonraker, I believe. Anyways, so as that family talks about, he's like, we don't serve governments, but we will serve certain people for the right price. If we think it's explicitly for this government act, as he says, I will become instantly unavailable to you. You know, and they always have to keep their guard up, and I think that moment is just trying to absolutely gauge where he's at without blowing his cover, blowing anybody's cover, basically.
I want to come right back to that French family, but I will say they stress the difference between Arab and Palestinian in this movie to the point where I started getting confused. Where because they're always like, I think there's someone says he's not an Arab, he's a Palestinian. I'm like, wait, I thought everyone from the Arabic region is Arabic, and then Palestine is just one region within that other region. But the way that guy said it was like, wait, what? But I couldn't tell if he was just upset, and I think Bond says that at one point.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I mean, but that's another root in that conflict of, yeah, we like to generalize that as these guys are Arab, and it's like within that there's a lot of different sects that don't agree with each other. And, you know, when they're saying like, oh, he's Arab, the big theme of this movie is home.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians do not have a home. And that's what they have been fighting for a very long time. They just happen to believe part of their home is Jerusalem, the holy city, that the Jews basically have. So, you know, to very simplify it.
Well, and also just to simplify it, after World War II, contextually, the UN gives what is now modern day Israel to you know, they make that a country as a Jewish state so that they can have a country, right? So, and in that process, the Palestinians get displaced, right? Yes. That's what happened?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, there's, again, all conflict from that, and then it goes all the way back 2,000 years, they're still fighting each other. Anyways, so within...
Also, and I know this might be controversial, so... But
this is a controversial movie.
But I'm not sorry. One of the best Family Guy jokes of all time is, and I think a lot of different people interpret this joke a lot of different ways. Yeah. But it cuts to, it's one of those Family Guy jokes where it cuts to Peter on a farm, and there's two guys saying each other, and he's like, "What? All I'm saying is that if you put a Palestinian guy and a Jewish guy next to each other, I can't tell the difference." and I think depending on what your worldview is, that joke is either hilariously accurate or the height of flabbergastery. There's no way anyone can make that mistake. Because there's some Jewish friends I have who are like, oh, that's funny because no one would ever confuse the two. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I don't even think I know what the difference is.
It's quite the Rorschach test. That
yeah, yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Anyways, all right.
This episode will be flagged on iTunes.
All right. So yeah, and...
Home.
The big moment in this movie, I think, that really ties it all together and really helped me understand not just the story from a human point of view, but like the worldview, is when he's talking to Eric Bana's character, Avner, is talking to the PLO guys they ran into in the safe house. And he says, like, they're kind of just shooting the shit. And the PLO guy says, yeah, but you have a home to go to. He goes, you don't know what it's like.
But he thinks he's German.
Yeah, he thinks he's German. Mm-hmm. And Germany is a country. Palestine is a very loose definition of where these people are from and where they can go. And
depending on who you ask, right? If you ask some hardcore, depending, and there's lots of variation between the two groups, right? But generally speaking, Palestinians say, our homeland has been occupied by Israel, and Israel says, this is ours. You guys figure out something else to do.
Mm-hmm. The idea of you don't know what it's like to not have a place on Earth. And that's something Avner's mother says very specifically, is that we have a place on Earth. Mm-hmm. And they don't. And there's
and not to cut to the end, but she says, he says in a way that he's talking to his mother, specifically, do you want to know what I did? In a way where she should be smart enough to know that, like, hey, your kid needs to tell you something right now. And she says, no, it's good enough just to know that we have a place on Earth.
Yep.
Which is kind of a very damning thing, right? Where the idea is, I don't care how we get there as long as we get there. I don't want to even know how we get there as long as I get what I want.
And you can kind of tie it to Minority Report in that the system and the society is held on some ugly truths, In Minority Report, it's government slavery. In this movie and in the world, it's these very fragile connections that we have in certain parts of the world.
I think Minority Report could have used a little bit of this movie,
Right.
and vice versa. Let's throw a telepath in this movie, see what it does.
But anyways, so going back to the scene where they're talking in the stairwell, the PLO guy has a key hanging on his neck.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that with a lot of Palestinian people who were misplaced, what they did is like a symbol to show like, I have no place in this world. They put the key to their house around their necklace and wore it everywhere they went. And so it's like when we get our place on Earth back, we have our key to go home to. But it's like that was their kind of unofficial symbol of I have been displaced by this ugly conflict.
Also,
so, like that's it's a detail they don't go into in the movie, but when you really look into it, that tells you a lot about who he is.
Not very incognito.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
he's working for the PLO, so it's like the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
I guess so. So as Mossad agents, though, why don't they kill the Mossad agents? Why don't they kill those guys?
So that scene again, it was they're under the cover of that. They're not working for a government because if they do, the French people are going to find out and they're fucked. Like their source is gone. So they're under the guise of that they're the German agents doing what they need. And that's a safe house that is owned by the French family. Now, it gets double booked on accident, and so the PLO guys are in there too. So they have to, again, it's another little cat and mouse game this movie plays. They have to keep their cover as, Germans. But also, these guys are the people that they're basically fighting. So
okay, and I mean, we will get into this movie eventually. The last question: who is this French family? And I think this is a weakness of the movie, where it's like, how are they? They're at the middle of all international espionage.
Not all international espionage. They are a source that can get you information for the right price.
But who are they? Are they real people?
I don't know if they're real or not, but according to, based on this book that was written, it's like they were a shady organization that's out there, and it's
not tied to any government?
Not tied to any government, so they claim. It's like, where else, who do you trust? Where do you get your info? Who is your source?
I do think it's a strength of this movie, but also a convenient cop-out, where and I think this is endemic, hold on, to all spy movies.
I'm grimacing at you.
This is intrinsic to all spy movies, not just this one.
Yeah.
Anything that isn't fully explained, or doesn't really maybe track, you could always say, hey, maybe it's a double play. Hey, maybe they're tied to something. Hey, maybe they're running a shell game. Hey, maybe they're, you know what I'm saying? Like, so the French family, maybe they're tied, it's just for convenience sake, say that they're tied to the French government. So they're the French government's secret group that absorbs data and sells data, right? So that would explain it. And throw in any, it doesn't have to be the French. It could be China, US, anyone. It could be anyone. But, so that would explain it. But the way it's in the movie, they don't explain it, right? They just say, if you want information, we can sell it to you.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's unexplained, but it's unexplained, which benefits a spy narrative, where it's like you're putting all your trust into this, and also it's like you don't think, and that's the thing.
And he warns him about that when they get in the beginning. He's like, I could be PLO, I could be CIA, I could be anybody. He's like, but I can get you what you need,
right?
And that's the bed they gotta lie in this world.
That's the one thing that Eric Bana, as he begins to sell his soul, realizes later. It's like, oh, they're getting information on me too.
Yeah,
I am now added to the pool.
That is a chilling scene,
right?
When because he does it almost because they've had a long connection, they've had these murders, and then they sit down with the dad and Matthew Almeric sit down with Abner, and he very calmly pulls out photo. It's photo of Abner. He's like, people are hunting you too, basically. Like that scene is absolutely chilling, and they're coming to me to get information on you. So that guy could be anybody.
It's time to get out, So I think it works in that context. So I will say that this movie does a lot of things well. I think every scene that is about every hit that they do, right? Like, you know, every assassination.
The stakes are different in every single one.
Right, and it's the same idea, right? We want to kill them,
Yeah.
Succinctly, you know, and they kind of decide, you know, bombing is the best way after shooting someone and no one cares about the shooting, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But every set piece is so good, and I like how this is not a sexy spy movie. This is like a gritty spy movie where like that first kill is so sloppy and rough and messy.
Mm-hmm. Falls on his milk bottle. I love the milk and the blood mixing together.
Yeah.
It's just, they just walk up to him, and it's kind of awkward at first. It's like, we're just pointing guns at you. That you can tell that they're not ready for it in a way.
And it feels like, you know, like when you're like upset at someone and you have a fantasy conversation in your mind.
Yeah. Only every day of my life.
Yeah, right? And then... and it feels like that's what he's trying to do. He's like, do you know why we're here? And he expects him to be like, oh, you know, say something. Yeah. And the guy's like, I don't care. You know, he's not even registering this. He's just like, don't shoot me.
Yep.
You know, and...
He was giving a lecture on, you know, the Arabian Nights 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's like, this guy is not prepared for this, you know? And I like that. I like that element of, like, he thought it was going to be so clean, and it wasn't. And then afterwards, they're acting like oh, we did it. It's like, you guys shot a guy and ran away. You know, it wasn't...
Yeah, there's no celebration here. And it's... You think it's this great victory for Israel or whatever your personal thing is, and that sets the tone for, you know, we're just killing people that, you know, they did a bad thing, a very bad thing to us, but they mean something to other people too, and like they're actual people. They're not just these ciphers for terrorism. Mm-hmm. So, which says a lot about, you know, the conflict and our current war on terror. It's like you're not fighting an idea, you're fighting actual people, and these people who stand for things and have families, and you know, to break them one way is just not going to do it. So, and then the next kill is the phone bomb, and then that stakes are up with that because this guy, he has a nice house in Paris,
and they hate him, right? They definitely, when he succumbs to his, you know, when he dies and succumbs to his wounds or whatever, they're like, you know, Mazel tov. Yeah. But they definitely don't want to hurt his wife or his daughter. Mm-hmm. So it's the first real gray line of like, ooh, but we don't want to do it.
Yeah. Like, we have to wait until she leaves. And then we get some really nice suspense when she has to go back in. Then it's, you know, certain people don't see her go in. And then Avner just barely sees that, like, oh, she just picked up the phone. Like, abort the whole fucking thing. And it's like, they only want to get their guy, but they're just too, not sentimental, but they care too much about, that's the only guy they want to get, because he did it. The daughter didn't do anything.
They have their limits.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a really well done scene where you think, you get this, you see the kid, one day they're like spying on the guy, and you see the kid and the wife get in the car and drive away. And you see that scene again, and it works to, okay, so visually now you know they're leaving, so now, you know, the next step of the plan is blowing this dude up. Yep. So when they come back, and then Eric Bana sees the door open in the car, he knows that the plan needs to be aborted.
Yep.
And that's really good visual storytelling with that. And again, it's not this sexy, like, we're gonna born supremacy kind of, we're gonna pass the note and you know, do it all really succinctly, right? Yep. This is like dirty, gross murder work. This is some wet works shit.
Yeah, this would be a good double feature with A Most Wanted Man with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Would it be? No, which one was that?
That was Philip Seymour Hoffman's last completed film, and he's a German spy, and they're kind of doing similar things, but it shows just the gritty, like, real spy work. You know, like, it's not James Bond, it's not Bourne Identity, it's, you gotta fill out a lot of paperwork, you gotta sit in shitty cars, and maybe you'll get some information, maybe you won't. And it just shows the real hard goddamn work it takes to be an actual spy. Mm-hmm. So I think it'd be an interesting double feature. Mm-hmm. So then, your next kill is the guy on the balcony.
Great one.
And they're gonna blow him up on his bed. And, like, he has an inadvertent conversation with the guy. And, like, the guy's kind of charming, you know? And he makes easy friends with him. And he kind of jokes about, like, oh, you're not going to get any sleep because this young couple fucks all night.
But he doesn't, he seems to be, when he says that, he's like, that's
exactly.
the world.
That's the world, exactly. And like he's just this charming dude, and then you get the shot of Abner looking at the lamp because the lamp is the signal, like we're good to go, and like that is when he really breaks. Of this, am I doing something that's worthy, or am I as bad as everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Just that shot of him sitting at that lamp is seared in my mind.
Mm-hmm. I also like how explosions in this movies are not like fireballs; they're just like real explosions, which is just like this.
It's more
horrifically
a
violent
concussion that has some fire in it. So.
Yeah, and horrifically violent concussion.
Yep.
I like that. I think movies need more of that because I think that is. Again, I'm gonna go back to horror, right? The horror, there's a spectacle of an explosion, which is the idea when a grenade goes off, it's like a barrel of gasoline exploding, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this huge fireball, and people fly away, but they don't really get hurt. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's like that movie, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's what's shown in this movie where it's like, you see that apartment, and his corpse is like stuck to the roof.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
His arm is on the ceiling fan.
Right.
And yeah, Abner got hurt, and then that couple is fucked up too. So it's
poor couple. Also, the dude's like blind, leading his girlfriend outside naked. It's like, oh my god,
that is war. That is what you're doing.
Next up, London.
I don't just want to make a list of all their kills.
Right.
But
Well,
like,
but this dovetails though into finish your thought.
So those first three are the one that set the tone of Abner really starts questioning what he's doing. But then it ups the stakes where Matthew Ulrich gives him a name. And he says, well, that name's not on our list. And he goes, yeah, but that's the guy who replaced the guy you killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when this story takes off in a different direction of violence just begets violence. It doesn't solve anything.
Right. Because
nobody ever got blown up and then said, well, I guess we lost. It's all they did was just get angrier, and then they plot their revenge.
Right. And it's one of those things, it's kind of akin to the idea of like when you work for a company you hate and you're like, when I quit, this place is going to be fucked. And it's like, you're not thinking rationally, because if you quit, then two other people will step up and take over your shit to get it going until they replace you. You know what I mean? Because momentum moves only forward. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Unless the whole place is just falling completely apart.
Yeah.
So it's like that idea that like, yeah, if we kill these guys, then they can't do it again. And it's like, yeah, but if these guys are like have a relationship to a process, the process will figure out a way to adapt without them.
And then we get to the London scene, and the drunk guys stop them, and then they think those guys had to be CIA. So then you get in this paranoid headspace of who's in bed with who. Like why is the CIA protecting this guy, or were those guys CIA? Was that really just a happenstance thing that kept us from killing him? It just sets up this whole nasty web of you can't just put a bullet to somebody's head and say it's over, and that's real world violence right there.
Not to derail our conversation, but this was the point in the movie where I was like, okay, great, this movie should be over now. And there was another hour to go, and that hour, maybe even hour plus, really just, I was done at this point. I was like, that's enough.
See, I think you need it because of that very specific theme of violence is just a never-ending cycle.
Story-wise, I agree with you. Operationally, I think it's just we've seen so many scenes that are the same, basically the same scene, right? Of them finding a guy, going somewhere, plotting to kill him, trying to execute that plan, it going awry or not. And again, I just think as a miniseries, you could just do 5 or 6 1-hour episodes where each episode is a different attempt at something. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But here it's just like, okay, so now we're gonna have to go do this again somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like,
But to me, it's just such a big story that you can't just fit it into a 3-act mold. You just can't.
That might be true.
I think it's a big disservice to just cut out, like, you got the Dutch assassin. Like, now people are coming after them and succeeding. They kill Karen Hines. And, the other guy, he gets a knife in his back.
Also, that was not clear to me. I had to look at the Wikipedia to figure out. I thought he killed himself. Did they ever say that he got stabbed to death?
They kind of look at him, and Abner says, like, knife. Like, in a way that's like, that's what happened, So, also there's Spielberg said a very happenstance thing in that scene when they pan over and then you see him on the bench. If you look at the bridge, the lights turn off, and they didn't plan on that, but he said that kind of one of those little accidental moments that help sell the scene more. It's cool. But yeah, then I do think where you gotta trim a little bit is after they fail to kill the last guy, who is like, it's Salame, who is, they're like, this guy was the guy who did it.
The architect.
He was the architect. They can't kill him. Abner goes back home, and then we kind of get a mini paranoid thriller in New York, and then we get the last scene with Ephraim, Jeffrey Rush's character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's that little paranoid thriller bit goes a little too long. That's about all I would cut out of this.
I would say this movie is offensively long.
No, I think you're offensively wrong. It absolutely needs a lot of these elements to tell that story of that this is not clean, this is not simple, this is not, you can't just end it right away.
And I agree.
You've only made things worse.
I agree with that in the sense of, I agree that this movie is one complete story, right? I agree with that. I'm just saying, operationally, it's not enjoyable to sit and watch that whole story all at once.
It's not supposed to be enjoyable. This is horror. This is what's actually going on in the world. This is a Minority Report.
I'm not saying, you're confusing what I'm saying. I'm not saying, again, because everything in life is like professional wrestling. There's two kinds of heat, right? Heat is when you don't like a bad guy.
Yeah.
There's heat, like real heat, and go away heat, right? Real heat is when you hate the character in the context of the show. Go away heat is when you hate the guy and you don't want to be watching this because this is not enjoyable in the context of the show.
Okay, I understand.
So go away heat is what I'm talking about.
Okay,
not heat. But I can see that the whole story is that is the story, right? The guy does these things, goes down this hole, falls into this trap, tries to come back, and struggles with the rest of his life. That is the story. I'm just saying, I wish it was just a little bit tighter. You know what I mean? And so let me get into this. In the beginning, we do a lot of flashbacks to the events of the Munich thing. Mm-hmm. We go I'd say over an hour without going back to it. And then in the last part of the movie, we keep cutting back to it again. Mm-hmm. I don't think that really works.
You just want to give it all away in the beginning, you think?
Well, I don't know what they're trying to do in the end. In the beginning with it, they're trying to show you why people will galvanize to do what the rest of the movie's going to do. It's a setup thing. And then in the end of the movie, I mean, depending on your interpretation of the movie, it's either an example about how violence begets more violence because you can see the parallel between the two, mm-hmm. or it's the justification of what they've done because look how bad this was. This is why they had to do what they did. But for me, it was again back in that go away heat thing of like, I don't need flashbacks at this point. We're in this story so much. And the way they do it, they divide them. It's not like they have one flashback. They kind of divide it up. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't know. And then he's like fucking his wife and thinking about this. Yeah. And I just feel like that was just not done well.
Yeah, that scene to me sticks out like a sore thumb a little bit.
This is what I'm saying. It's like what
when
is
I first
all
saw
this
it, I was
shit?
like, oh yeah, I get it. It's life and death. That's totally cool. And now I'm like, that seems a little overwrought.
This is what I'm saying, where it's like he's thinking about this horrible tragedy while he's plowing his wife, and it's like, I don't think you need either scene, and you definitely don't need the sex scene. Just give me, if you're gonna, you want to show Eric Bana thinking about this, just show him thinking. I just feel like the execution of that was just way off the mark. Yeah, just way off the mark.
I think what he's trying to do is you get the parallel of their first sex scene together, and it's your usual, just like a couple having sex. They
highly disagree with. Whoa!
I don't know how you bone, sir.
Listen, what I don't do is go from sexy time to arguing back to sexy time. That's not how I want to live, Kev. That's not how I want to live. Good. I want to go sexy time to enjoying a nice milkshake to sleep in. All right. None of this fighting in the middle.
I got you. But
get the ice cream, babe.
Get the ice cream. It's sexy time.
I got the blender.
Print the shirts. And then it's a parallel of that. He can't focus on anything else. Like he's a completely broken man from all these things he's gone through. Mm-hmm. I think is what they're trying to do. Again, I agree with you. That scene is overwrought.
And I think
watching it again after years of thinking it was brilliant, and now I'm kind of like, it goes a little too far.
And I think there's a weird neutrality in the scene that I think fails to hit the mark. I think that's what they're going for, is like, what does this mean to you? And I think it's the benefit of not really having music when you show a lot of the terrorism in this movie, right? A lot of the, and I'm talking about terrorism on every side,
Yep.
right? You don't have music, so you don't inform the audience on what to think. And I think it just doesn't work in that context, because like they have a little bit of music, and he's like, you have like these disgusting grunts of Eric Bana, also having sex with Eric Bana. I am off that boat. And he's like all this like fucking spits coming out of his mouth. And it's like, what do we? Yeah. It turns into like a student film at that point, where it's like we're mixing a sex scene with murders, and it's like, what?
Yeah, I agree. So, however, the last scene is chillingly effective when his last conversation with Ephraim. And that is, he just wants to get some kind of humanity back. He gets completely rejected, and then we pan over, and if you look way off in the distance, there's the Twin Towers. And then, we get the wrap-up text, and again, nothing got solved.
That's the thing, because he's like, will you break bread with me? And he's like, no. So that's what you get out of that scene, is that he's trying to get his humanity back, and he can't.
Yep. I think it's trying to get... He's done so much awful shit, and he just wants it to be over, and he wants some kind of connection with this guy he spent so much time with, and he just rejects him.
I also think that it speaks to the idea that we're dealing with the Mossad, but this could be the microcosm for the macrocosm of these groups are not interested in humanity. They're only interested... They're departments of defense, right? By having an offensive defense.
Yep.
But they're not really interested in that. They're just interested in war. Mm-hmm. He's like, come break bread with me. He's like, let's start this process. And the guy's like, I only want the information. I only want the action. I don't want to do this.
Yep.
And I think that, I think that's what I got out of that. And I will say, to this movie's benefit, there's a lot, they're presenting you with a thing, and I think a lot of people bringing what they already have will interpret it all differently. I think that is the benefit of the movie.
Yeah, and I think something Spielberg usually doesn't do in his films, where I feel they have pretty definitive viewpoints of like, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, this is what's good. And this movie really messes with you. Well, with you is the wrong word.
Well, but it challenges you.
It's like, this is the real world. It's not clear cut. People have agendas. They might not necessarily tell you their agendas. The French family, the Israeli government, the PLO. Mm-hmm.
Were those CIA agents?
And why are they protecting this guy? What's the CIA doing in bed with this PLO guy who was an architect of a terrible massacre?
Right.
It's the world's just not black and white, and I think it's the least Spielberg movie and the least Spielberg ending, where there's so much left open and meant to really challenge you and really push you as to what do you believe and how are you going to handle it. So, because this is what the world's like. It's masterfully done, and people give Spielberg so much shit for those endings of like, he always just wraps things up in a nice little bow.
And this ain't no bow.
This is the newspaper half wrap job under a Christmas tree, in a good way.
And I do think it's a good. I think is probably two good movies in here. You know what I mean?
It is an absolutely dense story.
Yeah.
And I think certain stories need to be this long. And I remember there was this assy article that came out not too long after Munich, and it was just some like USA Today writer pissing and moaning about how movies are too long and that a movie should never outlast your popcorn. That was his whole argument in this thing. And I was like, that is not every movie's goal.
Oh, by the way, first of all, don't be a mark.
Yeah, that guy is a mark.
You're a mark, because that first implies that you have to buy popcorn when you go to the movie.
Yeah.
And it also implies that you're eating popcorn, I guess, in a certain way. It's like, listen, homie, I'm just going to speak for myself, and this may be, it may be a indictment of me, but I don't care. I've never gone more than 10 minutes into a movie with, you know what I mean? Like, that popcorn gets eaten.
Yeah, that popcorn is gone before the lights dim most of the time.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, we're at trailer 3, and I'm like, oop, at the bottom here.
got kernels.
So yeah,
And that really helped me put into focus. Like, I think Munich absolutely justifies its running time.
And I do think a couple weeks ago on this podcast you said a 3-hour movie, a good 3-hour movie feels like 90 crisp minutes, and a bad 90-minute movie feels like 3 long hours.
I mean, I was paraphrasing Roger Ebert. That was one of his big things. He's like, the best movie is never long enough, and the worst movie is
too long.
Couldn't end sooner.
Yeah. And I do think that while you're saying that this movie is perfect length, I don't like how long it is. But that is not a overarching rule. I'm not saying I can't take a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I didn't like this 3-hour movie. If you can justify your Captain America Civil War is 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And
it breezes right by.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You're just like, so.
But I just don't think this movie's meant to be breezy. It's meant, we gotta sit there and take it in and feel what they're feeling. Because that's how you're gonna understand it. In my opinion.
I get what you're saying.
And everything's in my opinion.
I understand that. I just think it would be better suited in a slightly different format.
Alright. This movie might play better in the theater than at home. Where you're just locked into it. Because that first screening, I was like, edge of my seat the whole time. So.
It might do well with the intermission where you get an ice cream and think about what's happening.
It could,
Do you want to get anything else, or do you want to get into nitpicks?
Do nitpicks.
Nitpicks inspired by true events. I do not care if a movie is inspired by true events or not. That doesn't, especially
doesn't lend a credo.
As a horror fan, I think horror fans really look for that. Like, they love the idea of something inspired by a true story.
They're putting that on everything.
You put that on everything. I don't care. Put a vampire in it. It'd be better with that.
Yeah, and the true story is usually like one guy's account of one thing that happened to him one time.
Yeah.
In most horror movies.
A guy murdered someone. Someone spied on someone based on true story.
I saw a ghost one time.
And Fargo totally got me on that. I'm like, this is based on a true story?
Fargo got a lot of people on it.
Shit slow-mo. Not welcome.
Yeah, there's some shit slow-mo in it.
A couple of times. Smoking is dumb.
But the 70s, man, everybody smoked.
Golda
Meir's smoking, everybody's smoking.
You should have known better. That was dumb.
I do think this movie is enhanced by knowing a lot of outside stuff, but it could have weaved in a few extra things, like exactly who Mossad is, PLO.
Well, yeah, they should have enough, with the running time, they should have more time to explain anything.
I think there's certain people are going to get turned off just because they don't know what that is, and it takes a certain informed person to get a lot more out of it. So, but get informed, everybody.
I agree.
Get informed.
The book is called Vengeance, and I think the movie would have been a better name for the movie would have been Vengeance.
That was the original title for the movie, and somehow somewhere down the line it got changed. And I agree. I think Vengeance is a much better title. Munich,
because it's not really about Munich.
Yeah, not really.
Munich is the galvanizing event, but it's really about vengeance and how this is really part of a bigger system. But again, that's our interpretation, right? Like, maybe if you had a more sympathetic view of it, you'd say it is a Munich. It's just an isolated incidents based on the Munich tragedy.
Yeah.
But that's our opinion.
I just think Vengeance is a stronger title.
We alluded to this earlier, but the first sex scene is super unsexy. Like, he's having sex with a pregnant lady. That doesn't affect me at all. I'm totally fine with that. And even, she doesn't want to lay on her belly, so they're in that weird position. But, like, there's the sheet is like between them. I'm like, well, that's kind of in the way. I'm like, I wonder if the actors did that just so there was no actual like genital touching.
They've got stuff to prevent that.
I don't know, man. Why is that fucking sheet there?
I don't know.
That was weird.
Unless he's, there's that weird like Jewish tradition where you have sex through a sheet too. So
I don't know.
I guess I never really noticed that sheet.
I was like, get that sheet out of there, man.
I'll have to research this further.
And then, just arguing in the middle of that. Just, come on. What are we doing? Don't want to live my life that way. Eric Bana, when he wakes up in the middle of the night when the PLO people come, he has a gun in the back of his pants. So he's sleeping with a gun in the back of his pants.
Dude,
no.
They gotta be ready for anything. I totally buy that. Absolutely.
You're gonna sleep with a gun in your waistband?
Yeah.
No,
dude.
No.
These guys are hunters and they're being hunted. You gotta have a gun on you at all times.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're not gonna put it in the waistband of your pants.
All right.
If it's literally next to your bed and your hand is on it, if it's underneath your pillow, you're not gonna be able to sleep if fucking with this thing in your fucking. There's no way.
All right.
It would fall out in the middle of the night. There's just no way. Any cool stuff you want to use?
Top to bottom, great performances, but I really want to highlight, I love Mathieu Amalric's character, the younger Frenchman. He's just fantastic. Also, I just realized his dad was a Bond villain in Moonraker. Mathieu Amalric was a Bond villain as well in Quantum of Solace. So, 2 Bond villains.
2 Bond villains, one family. I like how they do have them eat together a lot.
Yep.
Although sometimes it's kind of like they're kind of doing that like filler dialogue, you know, where it's like, oh, this pot roast, like it's like, fuck, shut up.
You know that cook a brisket. It's great.
That was what it was. The music was really good, and the soundtrack, and also I like how they involve pop songs into the thing too.
Yeah, I like the Spanish version of the different language version of Black Magic Woman is great. So just being played by the Italian canal band, you know.
yeah, that was good. I did like that too. Also, when the Americans flip them off when they're driving away.
Yep.
Oh, so
it was
good.
funny.
Especially if they are CIA agents, because then it's like, we know you have guns, we know you came here to kill people, we know that you don't have enough information to act on what we're doing right now, so fuck you.
The scene where they're dressed up as women and doing the big assault, apparently that, 1, actually happened, and 2, is a great action scene, top to bottom. So.
Also, a lot of parallels between them changing into those women's clothes and the Palestinian dudes changing right before they go into the...
Yep. It's like, you gotta put your uniform on. You gotta, let's do it.
Also, quote of the night from Emily, Eric Bana, any relation to Kenneth Branagh? No, those names just rhyme. They're not the same person.
And he is Australian, and Branagh's British.
And Bana and Brenna are not the same word.
They're not the same name.
There it is.
But yeah, it's good suspense all throughout. Like, this movie doesn't forget to actually be a movie sometimes. Like, it's not all just everything sucks and you should feel bad about it. It's like, those scenes are genuinely suspenseful and they're genuinely intense to watch. So, Spielberg, always the showman.
Do you think his favorite movie favors one side over the other?
I think it's about as even-handed as you can get.
I definitely...
Because, it shows everybody as we are all flawed and we're all fucked up. And nobody's right in this situation.
And being 6 hours long, you know, it does allow itself to be all over the place. in a good way, all over the place, right? And I do think that you can bring... I think for you and me, the takeaway from this movie is that the world is fucked up and violence begets more violence. But I think, depending on your different worldviews, you can interpret a lot of things a different way.
Yep. Yeah, your personal experience can bring a lot to it. As we said at the top of this episode, the fact that the Palestinians said it's too favorable to Israel and Israel said it's too favorable to Palestinians means they probably hit that sweet spot. You know?
and I mean, I do think that they damn a lot of people, right? Like the PLO guys.
They damn Golda Meir, the Israeli prime minister. She basically set this whole thing in motion and explicitly said, forget peace, we need to be strong.
Right.
You know, and she was Times Woman of the Year at one point and was thought of this great sympathetic figure, but it's like, they basically show her as giving the order to kill these people.
Right. And they do call out a lot of people, like Jeffrey Rush is like, she didn't go not because her sister died, but because she didn't negotiate with them and people think it's her fault. She doesn't want to deal with it. So they do throw her under the bus that way. Even if you think that what she's doing is right, that is that's saying she's cowardly.
Yeah.
And there's good moments like the PLO guy says, we'll fight forever. You know what I mean? And it's like, because we want to find a home, and it's like, so you'd rather fight forever to get something back that someone else will never give up, as opposed to finding a new place to go to. You know what I mean? Like the way that conversation goes down, you know, it is damning of his opinion, of both sides' opinions. And then, you know, Bond says the only blood I care about is Jewish blood. You know what I mean? It's like, so this is about revenge. It's not about justice. It's not about making the world a safer place. This is purely about revenge.
It's not about making anything better. It's everybody's own motive.
So even if you think this movie depicts heroism or corruption, there's enough there to poison the water in each way you go. So I think it's actually good.
Yep. You don't see movies deal with this conflict very often just because it's so controversial.
Right.
And it's tough to talk about. And it's very hard to do it without taking some kind of stance on it. Because the conflict is so vague too.
Right.
If it was an easy thing, it wouldn't be going on 2,000 years plus now.
Well, and when you look at the way terrorists are depicted in movies, right? Even something like Iron Man, which is a likable movie, but you look at those terrorists, they all look like Osama bin Laden. And even in this movie, when you look at the terrorists, so you look at the Palestinian dudes in the airport, they are all dressed like 70s guys with ski masks, right? But 70s guys.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the people that they're killing, murdering, assassinating, hitting, they're all
families.
They're all regular looking dudes who seem to be functional members of society. They're not like cave dwelling weirdos.
Yep. Which is, again, that's the easy face you put on it, but that's just not true. And to try and put that really simple, these are the bad guys and this is what they look like, is completely belittling the situation.
Right. And I think that has a lot to say about the terrorism and the cost of war, right? Okay, so here's a controversial question. Do you think that our main characters are terrorists?
Yes.
I agree. If for no other reason, this context. They are, even if they're doing this in Israel, which they weren't, but let's say they were doing it, let's say they were like operating in Israel, killing people in Israel. You're creating terror to make a point, right? Like,
and and again, that's why they switched to bombing, because they're like, we need people to realize what we're doing. That's what terrorists do,
right?
They're making a statement and they're making a big statement.
So if you're living in a town, and we'll just call it London, and someone gets murdered, that's enticing fear into the populace. Someone got murdered on my block, in my town, in my city, in my country, in my whatever, right? So you're adding to fear. And then if someone got, but in the sad state of the world that we live in, someone getting shot, and they even said this in the movie, is not front page news intrinsically, right? Some random guy gets shot, and it's not. But a bombing is. So they're bombing people, creating fear in the general populace. You know what I mean? And they're not, it's like, it would almost be, and they can't, but it would almost be better if they're like, listen, we're only going after terrorists. We're doing this. But they're not. It's someone gets bombed, no one takes credit for the bombing. So you're just living in a world where the general population is perceiving it as terrorism, even if it's justice, even if they're doing the right thing, even if they're taking bad guys out, right? You're still not explaining that to anyone, so people just live in fear. They basically ruined the lives of those newlyweds. They got married, they went on their honeymoon, and during their honeymoon, they were victims of a terrorist bomb.
That guy might be permanently blind.
Yeah.
We don't know.
That girl they might be fucked up.
And that's it.
No.
Yeah, so, they are terrorists. I agree.
Yeah. They might be the freedom fighter kind of terrorist, depending on your interpretation of what's occurred here.
And they're a government-funded terrorist.
Right.
And that's one of the hard questions. Like, that's what Avner has to live with, is that he did the same thing that these guys did.
And I do think that, to the credit of this movie, because I think after 9/11, there's like, oh well, how did Osama bin Laden get money? And some of it came from the U.S. and some of it, back from the 80s when they were fighting against the invasion of the Soviets in Afghanistan, and then some of it comes from these other countries, Palestine and stuff, not Palestine, Pakistan and all that, right? That was what the rumor was. I don't remember if any of that was confirmed. But you're like, how can a government give these radical groups this money? But then you understand why, right? Because at one point they were having the same opinion. That's why we gave the Al Qaeda money in the 80s, because they were in tune with us. They wanted to fight the Soviets.
They were fighting the Reds.
Right. We want to fight the Reds. You want to fight the Reds? Have some money.
And then that planted the seeds of where they are now.
Right. So. And with this group, it's the same thing, right? It's like Israel gives them money to do things. They kill a woman in Holland, right? It's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Stay on the mission. You know what I mean? Like, if it's time to get out, get out. But like, you're gonna travel to Holland and murder this woman, like, and she's for hire, and you didn't even find out who she works for. I think that scene, there's a lot that's a real jazz of a scene, where there's a lot that's not said in that scene that has deep implications, where it's like, you guys don't want to know who hired her, like, you guys don't want to even ask, you guys didn't want to do anything, you want to take her in.
All they want is vengeance.
Right.
That's it. Purely just because their friend died. And that's, violence is an endless cycle.
This movie, Spielberg and Janusz Kaczynski.
Janusz Kaminski. Janusz is how he says it.
Holy hell.
Yep.
70s filming techniques, gritty film stock, zoom lenses, a lot of bell-bottomed pants.
Yeah, some tight pants, some floral shirts.
A lot of polyester. What do you make of this? Do you like that?
It's, I think, absolutely the right aesthetic to take, because we kind of think of the 70s with these techniques. You look at like French Connection, Dirty Harry, stuff like that. we kind of know the 70s through these various skills that filmmakers have used before. And I think to use those in a modern way is a brilliant way to capture this world. Just from a purely aesthetic standpoint. So I think you could shoot it more traditionally, but then it kind of loses a little bit. So I think it's a good style to really adopt. And he does it in really interesting ways because he uses the zoom lens to like show one thing and then he can pan over and then it's this whole different perspective on the shot and gives us a really interesting place where we're at.
I agree with that, and I disagree with that in this sense. I do agree that if you chase the aesthetic that's associated with the time, you can transport people there succinctly, right? That is a skill of filmmaking. But on one way, I kind of... Okay, so for example, like, if you make a Western, you make it sepia tone. People are like, Westerns, look, that's what that time looked like. Mm-hmm. Except, that's not what that time really looked like, right? Because when you look at the world now and the way you see the world now, that's how people saw the world then, right? With the sky, this color blue, these... whatever.
And I agree with you. People gave Michael Mann shit for doing that in Public Enemies. I was like, that was absolutely the right decision to do. Shoot it in high definition.
That's exactly where I was going with this. Because they said that time looked like sepia tone. Yep. And it's like, no, that time fucking didn't. Yep. To them, that was the future. We're living in the future. We're living in this amazing time. There's never been more progress than now, right? Mm-hmm. We have, and you look at all the things that they fucking had. Cars are getting big, industry, cities, jazz music, fucking whatever, right? Just like now. Right now, we look at ourselves as, look, we have iPhones, we have all this crazy shit. This is the most advanced things have ever been, which is what everyone has thought every year going back, except for, people who lived in like war-torn times. Yep. So, I don't know. In some ways, I think it's appropriate. In other ways, I think it's a crutch.
I think Spielberg isn't beholden to it, though. He's not constantly doing like, oh, this is like something Brian De Palma would have done, and this is something, Dirty Harry would have done. Mm-hmm. It's just it's an aesthetic. It colors the way the movie is shot. It's not completely beholden to every single stylistic choice. Mm-hmm. And he does use, I think, a lot more modern techniques throughout it too. Like, there's a lot of handheld shots. There's, just very visceral, when people die and there's explosions, it's very visceral. It's not done like a 70s cheesy way, So I think he kind of has his cake and he eats it too.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how they are committing acts of terrorism. Do you think that sanctioned death is ever justifiable? Government sanctioned death.
I mean,
does this question make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay. I wrote it. I don't know if I said it right. You can write something well, but you gotta talk it out loud.
Okay. I think the idea that all these paid officials and supposed smart people, the best solution they can come up with is killing somebody is absolutely wrong because it's never solved anything. Mm-hmm. You might get a rapist off the street if you give him, the death penalty or a murderer. But that's at a very micro level. On something that affects a big global thing, it's like you can't just kill a dictator and then all the dictators' people go away. Because we still have neo-Nazis, even though Hitler's dead. Mm-hmm.
So, we got a lot. There's a lot less Nazis than...
Well, they don't have the power or the influence that they had back then, but they're still there.
Right.
And they're still causing issues. So it's the idea that this is the best solution is... Again, it's complicated, but I never think it's the right way to do it.
Well, and I think this is the heart of what this movie's really about, because it's a tough question to answer, because in the movie shows that, like, you take these guys out and people replace them, right? But at the same time, what's the alternative? This happens, then you do nothing? You know what I mean? And maybe the answer is, yeah, you do nothing. That what you do is you increase security at these events,
But then you get the question of you're putting people in a police state, and are we going to give up? What freedoms are we willing to give up in order to feel safe?
Right.
And so it's, but that's, again, if you do nothing or you just do that, then that has its own set of consequences. Right.
So it's one of these things that we haven't figured out yet, right? It's like...
It takes, you'd have to go back to Captain America. Zemo says the best way to kill something is to kill it from the inside. So it's like, how do you would have to be savvy enough to turn the thing that you hate against itself. And that's how you would get rid of it.
And not to go full hippie here, but you look at America as an example, it's like, in the 60s, you had 100,000 KKK members, right? I think that was the statistic.
Yep.
Now you have like 5,000. You know what I mean? So it's like progress.
It's working.
It's working slowly. I mean, God damn it! If it's in this country, have we not gone kicking and screaming towards progress?
Yep.
Kicking and screaming.
And when we actually get there, we go, okay, this is all right.
Oh, of course, this is how it always was.
So we could have turned that switch, but no, you had to hold on to all your bullshit.
Right. So, is that a paint by all numbers? Of course not. That's a super complicated thing that I don't know how you execute that on with other cultures and other, but it's a weird thing. You look, and a lot of it is double-edged swords. You look at the rise of like rap music in America, right? To a older audience, this is confirmation of all the hateful things they ever thought about black people. To a younger audience, it's like, whoa, black culture is the shit.
Or it's what we've been trying to say this whole time. So finally, somebody's speaking my language.
Right. And then now you jump 20 years later, and hip-hop is part of American culture at its very deepest core, in the same way that rock and roll is. And, it's only progression from there. You have, it's weird to think that people with kids love, grew up listening to Snoop Dogg, but that's the world that we're in now, right? So it's, I don't know, it's the hippie, the liberal in me is like, progress is from progression, not from violence. But then at the same time, it's like,
But progress gives you no immediate satisfaction.
Right.
But the violence is something you can put on a newspaper headline like, we killed Osama bin Laden, Hitler is dead, and we won the war. It's like, you can put that in really easy terms, but then it's the long-term view, the progression of it, that's where it gets complicated.
But then
go the wrong way.
Is there a need for some violence on an appropriate occasion, right? Does that, on a global scale, does that work?
If we couldn't have done a sit-in and stopped Hitler, it's
that's exactly, exactly.
He was a perfect storm of so much influence and so much money that unless you go in there with your guns and your tanks, you can't stop him.
Right. Would slavery, and going back to progression, would slavery ever stop without a war? I would argue no.
Yeah.
Because again,
it was such a way of life.
Yeah. So. It's the America. It's that would be the end of the world. That's what people were saying, right? Like, if you take slavery away from us, that ends our whole world. So you can't do that. And then they fought to the death for it. It doesn't make them right, but it is how they thought about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated question. I think this dovetails very nicely into big picture talk. Do you like this movie? Does it work?
I absolutely love this film. I think it's one of Spielberg's best works.
I think I didn't enjoy watching this movie for reasons of, I said, offensively long, and I think it starts to slog, and I think a lot of good stuff.
And you just don't like long 70s hair. If you don't like 70s hair, you're not gonna like this movie.
Apparently,
full of 70s hair.
And I think that the longer it gets, it starts to pull things down. It's just it's a real red pen moment where you just underline something and write poor in the margin. But I think the conversation we had here, is really interesting. So I think I like the conversation better than the actual watching of this movie, which I will never watch again.
This is probably my 5th or 6th time seeing it. Easily.
So you've spent 45 hours watching this movie in your life. So in Spielberg's repertoire of resume, what?
His over.
Where do you put this? Essential, adequate, forgettable, terrible?
I would put it in essential only because it shows just how big his range is. He can make something like E.T., Indiana Jones, but he can also make this very dense, very dire look at our world today.
I agree with that. I do think that as a filmmaker, it's interesting to see that someone does have this kind of a range. You look at, he made a monster movie, Jaws, and then a real life political, gritty thing here. Although I will say that it is condemning him a little bit, because I think that this movie plus Warhorse shows you that as he's gotten older and the people who basically grew up on his movies became studio executives and things, they really don't know how to rein him in. Like, they just let him.
The only person who can say no to Steven Spielberg is probably Kathleen Kennedy
and George Lucas.
And he said, yes, we're putting monkeys in Crystal Skull, having it. It's my Lucas.
It's pretty good. Pretty good.
Faster and more intense.
I think with a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of more energy, you can make that into a pretty sweet Obama too.
If I was faster and more intense.
Yeah. We need our children to learn. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm quoting George Bush into my Obama voice. It also affirms to me that, like, I'm not against, like, real movies about real issues, but, like, if I was ever going to make a movie, it's going to have dinosaurs in it, or robots, or demons.
And I agree. I'm not going to just sit down any day and watch Munich. You know?
Nope.
I got to get in the right headspace and then get into it.
And
Same
also,
with, like, Lawrence of Arabia. Same with any kind of big, dense movie. It's like, you're not going to eat the 24-ounce steak every single day. But every now and then, it just fills you up to exactly what you need.
To put this movie over, I will say that it could have been much worse decision-making wise if they made the movie about him pining over his family and what he's lost. That is an element here, but it's really about the vengeance. It's really about the mission, and that's what they keep harping on. Like, let us do our work. Let us do our work. When they say you can't go in any Arab country and do anything, and they're like, no, we have to go to this one and do this thing. I like that about it, you know what I mean? Like, where it could have been, you know, a guy pining over his lost family for 3 hours, and it wasn't, and I'm glad.
Yep.
But so, you know.
It falls in that great genre of professional people doing dangerous work, which is, I think, mine it for eternity, because I love it.
That is true, and that's a good point. And just like this movie, we've gone a little bit long, so it's time to wrap this up. Kev, you were so kind.
See, a deep conversation takes time.
It does, but
there you go.
We're gonna get this episode's gonna get cut down. Kev, you wrote this episode. Thanks.
Yes, recommended this film for our Spielberg.
Indeed. Mr. Jibber Jabber, I was your host. Kev, you were the other host.
I was here.
Jeff Russell does our music. Thanks, Jeff.
Yes.
Let's do us. Come back next week. Another Spielberg. Maybe something else. Maybe if you listen to this in the future, you're not listening to these in order. Maybe you're going to jump to Fast and the Furious number 5. Maybe you're going to jump to The Hive. Maybe you're going to jump to other things we haven't done that we're talking about doing right now. The Titanic. Who knows?
Anything could happen to you.
Godspeed. So we're going to get out of here and eat some lunch.
Let's do it.
Here